that animation just there. It's made with PowerPoint, really fun to make, honestly. But anyways, so today we're looking at B.4.1, adaptation to environment, and B.4.2 ecological niches. As always, if I can improve on anything during these videos, maybe it's my explaining, my animations, comment that, and if you like it, obviously like the video as well. Let's go. Starting with habitats, we have two types. First one being a microhabitat or a small habitat. It can be as tiny as under a log, and a microhabitat that can be as large as a whole forest. Now both of these have biotic or living factors in common, and these can be things such as plants, animals, or organisms in general. Now they also have abiotic factors in common, which are the non-living factors, such as the minerals in the soil, the presence of water, the pH of the water, etc. You have a bunch of those here. Now a limiting factor is defined as the inability to tolerate a certain abiotic condition or factor, restricting where a species can live. Using humans as an example, we can't live in the space that's occupied by water, right? So if, for example, the Mediterranean Sea suddenly disappeared, there would be a whole lot of space for us to live, okay? If that makes sense. Now, a habitat describes geographical location of the area, the physical location, which is the biotic and abiotic factors, and the ecosystem, which is the interaction between these. Now, have in mind that abiotic factors or non-living factors tend to cause competition between species and a hierarchy based on survival chances. Lastly, have in mind that habitats can also be aquatic or terrestrial, aquatic being under the water and terrestrial being on the ground. So adaptation, we know what it is, but how does it actually happen? So there are various different reasons for this. We have random mutations and mostly environmental selective pressures. Okay, so certain conditions in the environment, they're going to cause natural selection right here, which is when organisms with certain genes are more likely to survive and reproduce. So for example, we have that the giraffes with longer necks are more likely to survive than the giraffes with shorter necks because they can reach the higher branches in the trees and their leaves, and hence they will pass on their genes to the future generations. So let's look at a few examples. First, we have these plants right here that you'll see at the beach. So essentially these grasses have strong horizontal roots that stabilize the sand, allowing more of it to settle, okay, and hence not killing the plant. Then we have mangrove trees. So they are halophytes, meaning they can survive in extremely high salinity, and they're also pneumatophores, so they have specialized roots that provide them with the oxygen in the soil full of water. Let's have a look at species distribution range. So firstly, have in mind the following definitions. The range of tolerance is the span of environmental conditions which an organism can survive in and function properly. And the second definition, species tolerance, is the distribution depending on how well a species is adapted to abiotic factors. Okay, this is relevant to this diagram where we'll see the density of species in different areas. So first we have specialist species which are adapted to extreme or specific abiotic conditions. So they might be adapted to the conditions in this specific area right here. Maybe it has extreme conditions or specific abiotic conditions. And then we have generalist species, which is the opposite. They can survive across a broader range of abiotic conditions, though they are generally not extreme or very specific. Let's have a look at transect lines, where firstly you're going to draw a grid over a certain area. Then you're going to draw your transect line. And there are three things you can do here. First, there's the belt transect, where you count how many plants and animals there are. So there's 9 trees, 5 pigs, and 6 cows around here. Then we also have the observational transect, okay? So you walk along a straight line, as this man right here, the transect line, and you simply watch and write down what you see. And the third method is the line intercept sampling, where every time the line touches a plant, you will record it, and this helps you measure which plants are more common and how they're spread out. Now, nowadays we also have sensors that are going to measure the physical or chemical properties such as temperature, light, or humidity, and the data loggers that record this data from the sensors, and this is quicker, safer, and more accurate than manually done. Abiotic factors, conditions that they imply, and the adaptations from certain plants as a response. So looking at poor soil quality, we have legumes that have developed symbiotic relationships, which essentially means a partnership with another organism, in this case the nitrogen fixing bacteria, to obtain nitrogen for the air. So the legumes provide certain nutrients, I suppose, and the nitrogen fixing bacteria provide the nitrogen which they get from the air, if that makes sense. This is present in another topic, I think, as well. So yeah, now with poor water supply, we have that during drought, rice plants can reduce water loss by closing their stomata. Okay, so we know that leaves have stomata. Well, these will be closed in rice plants during droughts. Next up, extremely high temperatures. Tomato plants have developed heat shock proteins to protect against these temperatures. Simple. Light, so poor light intensity. We have that ferns and shade-tolerant trees grow larger, thinner leaves and increase chlorophyll content to maximize this light absorption. We know that chlorophyll is present in chloroplasts and is responsible for photosynthesis, so increasing its content is going to maximize the light absorption. And lastly, we have for excessive light intensity, that's in deserts. This happens in deserts, right? So cacti have thick, waxy skin that helps them retain the water and reflect this sunlight. Now let's do the same with animals. So we have that climate patterns cause bats and ground squirrels to hibernate during the winter months in order to conserve energy and survive in these colder temperatures. Then we have the fluctuations in water levels, where camels and kangaroo rats will store water in their bodies to survive in arid or dry environments caused by the lowering of water levels. Then we have extremely low temperatures, which cause polar bears and penguins to have thick layers of fur or blubber, also known as subcutaneous fat, to insulate them from this extreme cold. Following up with changes in light intensity caused by day and night, bats and owls are active at night to avoid predators so the predators can't see them, and take advantage of this as well by going for their prey at night, because the prey can't see them coming either. Now looking at changes in food supply. These cause herbivores to have adapted specialized teeth or digestive systems to extract nutrients from these tough plant materials. We've seen this before in the video, I think. Now looking at biomes. So they're a group of ecosystems with similar abiotic or non-living conditions. They're impacted mainly by these two conditions, which are temperature and rainfall pattern. As you might see from this graph, it's not that big, I apologize. Just have in mind as well that they are both impacted by latitude. Coral reefs are an example of a biome, and if we look at the conditions necessary for its existence, we have that the depth of the water must be shallow, between 2 and 45 meters, where the sunlight can reach. This also ties in with the water clarity that must be clear in order for this sunlight to actually enter. Then we have other conditions of the water, such as the pH level that must be slightly alkali, the salinity, and the water temperature that must be slightly warm, between 23 and 29 degrees Celsius. Now looking at different adaptations from the organisms in this biome, we have the symbiotic relationships between the corals and the algae, providing them with energy. The camouflage from the octopuses that have developed unique color patterns, allowing them to blend into these surroundings and avoiding their predators. Then we have the protective covering or the shells of snails and sea urchins, the stingers and spines for many species, and the reproductive strategies such as laying eggs or asexual reproduction. Let's have a look at some desert adaptations. So firstly, we have that the vibrant red flowers of this plant attract pollinators for reproduction. Then we have that its leaves sprout after rainfall to perform photosynthesis. Okay. Then we have that the chlorophyll containing bark allows it to carry out photosynthesis even without leaves, because as you can see, this plant does not have any leaves, and so it uses its chlorophyll containing bark. It also has long thorny stems that expand to store water during droughts, and remember that thorns is a deterrent for herbivores. Lastly, we have that it has a deep root system that allows it to access water from deep in the soil, and it also has a horizontal root system that quickly absorbs even small amounts of precipitation or rain. Let's have a look at the adaptations of the desert salamander. So firstly, we have its noticeably slow metabolic rate or metabolism, which allows it to survive longer without food or water. Its powerful venom and jaws to protect itself from predators and, well, kill its prey as well. Its fat stored in the tail that allows it to also survive longer without food. And lastly, we have its skin with bumpy scales to retain the moisture in this hot environment that the desert is. I have two examples for adaptations to tropical forests which are relevant to the IB. So firstly, we have these lily pads right here, which have flowers that emit fragrance, attracting pollinators such as bees. They have large circular leaves that you can see here, which are covered in a waxy coating that helps them repel water, helping them stay afloat in the ponds in the water. And they have a root system that allows them to anchor themselves to the muddy bottom of the river and extract nutrients. Okay, so we know, so it's essentially their anchor. You know, boats have anchors that attach themselves to the ground. Well, they have their own anchors that also provide them with nutrients. Now, looking at this eagle, we'll see that it has strong talons to crush the skulls of its prey. It's pretty brutal, I know. They have strong sensitive hearing and binocular vision. That is B.4.1 finished. Let's have a look at B.4.2. Also make sure to leave a comment suggesting how you would improve these videos. You can tell me what you would improve, but also what you like. And yeah, let's have a look. There are three types of bacterial modes of respiration, starting with obligate anaerobes. We have that they cannot survive in oxygen, lacking enzymes to neutralize the reactive oxygen species. Okay, this is some chemistry here, some biochemistry. You don't need to know exactly what this means, just make sure you remember. We're going to simplify it in a second. So because they can't neutralize these reactive oxygen species, they're going to use alternative electron acceptors such as sulfate, nitrates, iron, or mercury. So to put this simply, they are forced, they are obligated to respirate anaerobically without oxygen because they cannot neutralize reactive oxygen species. Okay, so now, yeah, they avoid air. That's why they avoid air, because the air has oxygen. Now, looking at facultative anaerobes, facultative is, you could say, it means optional. They can use oxygen if it is available, and they can also switch to fermentation when the oxygen is not present. So right here, the oxygen isn't present, so they are using fermentation, and here in the surface of this liquid, they are using the oxygen. Okay, they're respirating aerobically, and here they're respirating anaerobically, if that makes sense. Though they do prefer aerobic respiration because it has more ATP yield, so it gives them more energy. They can also use alternative electron acceptors to survive, this time in extreme conditions. Lastly, let's have a look at obligate aerobes. So, as the name suggests, they are obligated to respirate aerobically, as you can see here, and their only electron acceptor is oxygen. There are various types of nutrition. So the most obvious one and the one that humans use is heterotrophy. So this is essentially consuming other organisms or dead organic matter, such as saprotrophs. So saprotrophs are a type of heterotrophs. Let's just have a look at them one by one. So starting with autotrophs, the main example is the photosynthesis of plants. This is where they convert light energy from the sun into chemical energy, glucose. We'll see the formula here. So we'll see that this right here is going to be the glucose, and they also release the CO2 that we need for aerobic respiration. So this happens in the leaves of plants, and in the thallus there's a structure called a thallus in algae. So these have both chloroplasts with photosynthetic pigments. It is chlorophyll, that's the pigment, that absorb the sunlight. Now, let's have a look at an example of a mixotroph. So it does convert sunlight to electrical energy for its metabolism, but it also eats other insects. So it has characteristics of both heterotrophs and autotroph, hence making it a mixotroph. Okay, so next up we're gonna have different types of mixotrophs. So we have obligate mixotrophs. Remember that obligate means forced to. So they're forced to do mixotrophy because they require both autotrophic and heterotrophic nutrition simultaneously. They are forced to do both in order to survive. And then we have facultative mixotrophs, pardon my pronunciation, which can switch between the nutrition modes based on the environmental conditions, so they can choose depending on which situation they are in. Now, looking at an example of holozoic nutrition, which is a type of heterotrophy, we have the human digestive system. So remember that holozoic nutrition has 5 steps. There's the ingestion of the food, so taking it in a solid or liquid form, the digestion, breaking it down into smaller molecules, the absorption, the assimilation, which is using the nutrients, and the egestion, removing the undigested waste. An example of egestion would be feces. Okay, feces is not excretion, it is egestion. Have that in mind. Okay, now next up we have saprotrophs. An example of this would be fungi, which use external digestion, secreting hydrolytic enzymes. Because remember, they consume dead organic matter and they're going to digest it externally. And they can break down tough plant materials such as cellulose, hemicellulose, and pectin. Let's also have in mind this thing, which is that photosynthetic prokaryotes, we know that prokaryotes are not plants, though these prokaryotes use photosynthesis like plants. These lack membrane-bound chloroplasts. Only plants have chloroplasts. So instead they have certain structures called thylakoids in their plasma membranes, as you can see right here. The three-domain phylogenetic tree of life, as the name suggests, has 3 components, starting with bacteria and followed by archaea and eukarya. Let's look at archaea, which is relevant to our course. So archaea are extremophiles, meaning they can survive in very harsh environments, and specifically halophiles, meaning they can survive in environments with very high salt concentrations. Now comparing them to bacteria, we have that they are unicellular and they lack a true nucleus, okay, which is similar to bacteria. Bacteria also lack a true nucleus, but this time they have polysaccharides in their cell walls instead of the peptoglycan found in bacteria. Now, they can also be autotrophic or heterotrophic methanogens. What is a methanogen? Essentially an organism that wants to generate methane. So remember that autotrophic methanogens use carbon dioxide and hydrogen, and heterotrophic methanogens use organic compounds such as acetate, methanol, or methylamines to produce this methane. Okay? Having a look at dentition, our first organism is the cookie cutter shark. Let's have a look at some of its adaptations. So firstly, its lips will ensure a tight seal when it holds onto its prey, where its upper teeth will serve as the anchor and its lower teeth will slice the actual flesh. As you can see from this picture, this would be the wound caused onto the other organism. So essentially what it does is create a vacuum by pulling back its tongue and again using the upper teeth as an anchor and the lower teeth to slice and the lips as a tight seal. Dentition, but this time looking at the Hominidae family, starting with its first component, the hominids, which involve hominins, which we're going to look at in a second, and great apes such as gorillas, chimpanzees, and orangutans. Now the hominins are all the modern and extinct Homo sapiens plus their immediate ancestors. Looking at our first species, we have the Paranthropus robustus. It's not exactly this ancestor you see here, just remember that their skulls used to look like this, as they had a sagittal crest, which allowed attachment for large muscles required for heavy chewing. They also had very thick enamel, and again, they would chew at the back because their diets had a lot of fibrous plants that required this heavy chewing. Now, also remember that as you can see, they had a very small stature, around 107 centimeters tall, nicknamed the hobbits. Looking at our second species, we have the Homo floresiensis. Again, it's not exactly one that you might see here, just remember what its skull looked like. It had large teeth in proportion to its skull size, and they also ate fibrous plant materials requiring large quantities for energy, so they needed their heavy chewing. Now, they started eating higher energy meats, and this allowed reduction of their digestive system, which in turn freed energy to support brain growth and hence supporting evolution. Looking at some herbivore adaptations for invertebrates, remember that this is any organism that doesn't have a spinal column. We have that insects have strong mandibles to chew on leaves and plants in general, and some insects are actually fluid feeding, meaning they have a stylet. An example of this would be the aphid that inserts a 1 centimeter proboscis into plant tissue, secreting a gel-like saliva to form a sheath around the stylet, seal holes in the cell, and aid in the fluid extraction. Now, looking at mammals, we'll have that they can grow teeth up to 50 centimeters long, and this compensates for the constant grinding wear that comes with all this plant chewing, okay? So looking at the structure, we have that their front incisors right here are used to cut plant material like scissors. Then they have a gap called the diastema, so it's a gap between the incisors and molars that allows the tongue to move food to the back, okay? To the back for grinding, which happens in the back molars, okay? So this sideways grinding increases surface area for digestion. Now, lastly, we have eye adaptations of herbivores. So if we'll see this rabbit, it's got the eyes on the sides, so they're positioned far apart, and this increases its range of vision. Okay, and hence this helps them to respond quickly to danger and avoid predation. Let's have a look at plant-animal warfare. Okay, I'm using this stupid game as an analogy, but just see it as plants versus animals. So we'll have that the animals are trying to eat the plants, but the plants actually have defense mechanisms such as thick rigid leaves, as you can see here, they're difficult to chew. They have spicy thorns, which are sharp extensions of the epidermis. These thorns right here, they're these sharp things right here that are gonna repel the herbivores, and microscopic thorns called trichomes that repel these small insects such as the snails, I would assume, maybe even smaller insects. Now, some plants also produce toxic or secondary compounds which are going to deter the herbivores, even humans, so these are known as the toxic plants. And some animals have evolved enzymes to break down these toxins or even use them to their advantage. Now, in response, some plants evolved non-toxic compounds that actually become toxic after digestion. Okay, that's a sneaky trick. And we have phytochemicals as well, which are some of the toxics from plants. There's phenolics, polyketides, alkaloids, and terpenes. So let's look at two types of terpenes. We have artemisinin, used to treat malaria, and paclitaxel, used to treat various cancers. Okay, so you would just need to memorize this. Hopefully not have to pronounce it. These adaptations that you're going to see right here are the reasons why predators have survived for so long and how they kill their prey. The next slide is the opposite on how the prey actually survive these predators. Let's look at the more obvious ones, such as the physical ones: speed, agility, sharp claws, sharp teeth, and digestive systems that can break down the animal flesh, the meat. Then we have the sensory adaptations, such as spotting prey from 3 kilometers away, spotting them from underground with very good senses of smell, followed by the chemical adaptations. So you might know about the fire ant, which injects a very painful venom through a stinger on its abdomen, and it contains alkaloid chemicals called solenopsins. You don't want to have this in your bloodstream. It sounds scary as well. Then we have cone snails. They live in the sea, underwater. They use a harpoon-like structure to inject venom into the fish and their other prey. This venom contains insulin. Remember that insulin lowers blood sugar. So they lower the blood sugar of the fish rapidly, and this, well, immobilizes them because they have no sugar for energy. Lastly, we have the behavioral adaptations. They are used by more intelligent species such as dolphins. So in shallow waters, so shallow waters are not deep, they might be like 1 meter deep, the dolphins will swim in circles and use their tails to stir up mud. So the mud is going to go up in the water. This forms a ring around the fish, so the fish is trapped, and the dolphins will catch the fish midair when it tries to escape. As a response to the adaptations of predators, prey have developed the following: so camouflage, speed, agility, defensive features such as the hedgehog spines, warning coloration, so you might have seen those frogs that are like red, orange, that signals a lot of toxicity, followed by sensory adaptations. We've seen this eye adaptation before in the video. The chemical adaptations, these are very effective. So an example of these would be skunks. You've probably seen them in cartoons. They'll spray their foul-smelling liquid or gas, which contains something called thiols, and this smell is horrible and can travel up to 1 kilometer, so predators will not be getting close to them. And lastly, we have behavioral adaptations as well. Fish like mackerel form bowl baits. You've probably seen those in documentaries, and this protects themselves through collective movement. Because they move all together, they're less likely to be trapped by predators. Here we've got a few adaptations from plants. So this one's pretty interesting. The climbing plant, in order to access the sunlight, it grows long aerial roots up to 300 meters to climb the tall trees. Then we have epiphytes that don't actually grow in soil. They grow in the branches of other plants using their moisture and the moisture from the air, and even growing downwards, sometimes even killing their host. Then we have the shrub layer plants, shade tolerant. They have large, broad, thin leaves, as you can see here, to maximize their sunlight absorption, and herb layers, which are in the surface of forests. So they have soft stems and they tolerate low light conditions because they are under all the tall trees above. Okay. Now at the end of the video, let's look at competitive exclusion, where we have two factors right here. There's temperature and humidity as examples. And this blue bubble right here that you can see containing species 1 is known as the fundamental niche, which is the full range of conditions a species can live on if there were no predation, competition, or other limiting factors. Okay, so this is the ideal scenario for a species. It's paradise. Well, in real life, we know that this is not the case because there's other species, there's other predators, such as species 2. Okay, so in this case, it's going to reduce the range of conditions that species 1 can survive in. It's going to occupy some space, and this is known as the realized niche. Okay, so it appears and steals the conditions from species 1. Species 2 can be a competitor, it can be a predator. It's just its actual presence that causes this change. And so again, the realized niche is known as the full range of conditions a species can live on with the presence of competition, predation, or other limiting factors. Now this ties in with Gauss's law, which states that two species cannot occupy the same ecological niche for a long time because one species will eventually outcompete and exclude the other. Now lastly, we have that niche partitioning is a phenomenon when species adapt to reduce competition and allow coexistence between each other. And there are two types. So the first type is spatial partitioning, where they use different physical areas within the same habitat. So looking at the birds here, we'll see that some birds are higher up the tree than others. And lastly, we have temporal partitioning, which is when they use the same resource at different times. So again, with this example, we have that the birds have different nesting times and varied food needs. So that would be the end of the video. If you liked it, please leave a like, subscribe, and comment how you would improve it as well. Thank you.